Welcome to a program featuring interviews of state and federal candidates, as well as the incumbents from districts served by Clatsop, Marion, Polk, Tillamook, and Yamhill counties. I'm Ruth McEwen, an advisory council member serving Northwest Senior and Disability Services Advisory Council. I want to welcome candidates, incumbents, and advisory council members to the 2022 Candidate Forum, which is sponsored by our Senior Advisory Council and our Disability Services Advisory Council. Northwest Senior and Disability Service is a local governmental organization that provides Medicaid, Oregon Project Independence, Older Americans Act, and grants-funded programs. The mission of the Northwest Senior and Disability Services is to promote dignity, independence, and health, honor choice, and empower people. The assistance and support we provide consumers include information and assistance, in-home and community-based services, and financial and medical help, meal sites and home-delivered meals, option counseling, adult protective services, Medicare counseling, peer mentoring, money management, as well as health and wellness programs. Because of the number of state legislative districts that our service area covers, we have invited a large number of candidates to be interviewed. Each candidate has been given information on the format used in these interviews. Each candidate will be introduced by a member of the advisory councils. Then each candidate will have the opportunity to answer questions which will be timed. That way you, the viewer, can compare apples to apples. We thank these candidates for their willingness to share their views about services for Oregon seniors and people with disabilities.
Hello, my name is Monica Adams. I'm a volunteer with the Disability Advisory Council at Northwest Senior Disability Services. Today, I'm excited to be interviewing Jamie McLeod Skinner, who is the Democrat candidate for Congressional District 5. Jamie, thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing your time. I'm sure you have a lot going on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all the work you do for Oregonians and really enjoying this opportunity for community outreach. And just to note, both the Democratic and Independent Party of Oregons have both nominated me for the 5th Congressional District.
Yeah, I saw that. Congratulations on the endorsement from the Independent Party.
Thank you.
So why don't you kick us off with a high-level overview of how you have advocated for seniors and people with disabilities in the past?
Sure. Well, it all starts with your why. And when I was 8 years old, my mom told me to always leave a place better than I found it. And that's really been a mantra for me throughout my life. You know, back then she was a single mom raising 2 kids. She'd get up early to drive a school bus. She would teach all day. She drove a school bus home. And in the summers, she picked fruit. She was a farm worker. And so I learned my values of hard work, commitment to family, commitment to community from her. And then also the issue of disability is very personal for me because my godfather, James Graskamp, was quadriplegic. He was also a renowned professor at the University of Wisconsin pre-ADA and helped to found the university's Disability Resource Center, which accommodates students. So I had an early awareness within my own family. But I believe with anything, it starts with awareness and listening and learning and then advocating for. So I began my public service in post-war Bosnia and Kosovo. When I was in Kosovo and I was in charge of repairing schools and hospitals, I met a man who's 40 who'd never left his home because he was disabled. And it so profoundly struck me that from that point forward, every single project that I was in charge of, we made sure they were all accessible. So when people impact our lives, and then we impact programs. So when And it's not just physical disability. I've had friends who speak ASL, and I didn't realize until those experiences what the barriers that I was creating for people. So when I served as a city council member, I was actually the chair of the Housing Rehabilitation Program, which was an investment program in helping aging seniors upgrade their homes at no cost to them. It was a loan program, a zero interest rate loan program, to help make their homes safer and more accessible. I'm a lifetime member of the Disabled Veterans, American Veterans Auxiliary, and recognize also that sometimes there are seen and unseen wounds and disability that folks have. And then more recently, I was the interim city manager for the city of Talent, which lost a third of its homes to wildfire in the 2020 fires. And of those homes, half of them were seniors on fixed incomes, and the other half were those farm workers. And so I worked very hard to make sure the city began rebuilding and reconstruction, and especially working with such a vulnerable population. Now I help out the state on emergency preparedness. So identifying the challenges for so many communities and reaching out, making sure things are accessible, information's available, and people don't feel left behind. So, all of these issues, and what I've found in just listening to seniors and into folks with disabilities, is that it's the same that so many working families are facing: affordable housing, caretakers, healthcare, childcare, all these things, plus the complexity of navigating the challenges of disability. And I've also frankly heard that there's both interconnection and differences between young folks with disabilities who may not feel as connected to some of the challenges seniors are facing, but also have some of their own challenges they're facing. So I'm really proud of the work I've done, and I'm really excited for the opportunity to do so much more for seniors and people with disabilities as serving as a congresswoman.
Thank you so much. It's great to hear about your advocacy and what you've done in your roles, and that you have personal insight into it as well. So looking at the role you're running for, one piece of really important legislation we pay a lot of attention to is the Older Americans Act, which provides really critical programs for older adults in Oregon. So as Congress considers funding for that program in fiscal year 23 and 2024, how would you protect and continue to increase funding for the Older Americans Act and other aging and disability programs?
Well, it's both increasing my own understanding by talking to folks, making sure that the legislation is updated to meet current needs and face current challenges, and then also advocating to my colleagues to make sure they understand so we can get the legislation across the finish line. That's the bottom line that's so important. But that awareness and that listening and learning is something that's really important to me. I remember years ago reading a book that referred to those who did not identify as physically disabled as TAPs, temporarily abled persons, saying that within our lifetime, we will face challenges ourselves. So really updating that understanding of the challenges and helping people to internalize it. Investing in programs that help our communities and our families be safer and healthier and more secure, help people to retire with dignity. These are all things I feel very strongly about and have been a strong advocate for. I also know that Congresswoman Bonamici, who's a personal mentor of mine, has done tremendous work on this issue. And I would work with her, and I would learn from her to how we can be most effective in Congress to make sure these community-based programs are supported and expanded as needed. With the challenges of COVID, we saw some additional needs and challenges that came out, and especially around healthcare. And so making sure that we make these investments, because the bottom line is it's about doing the right thing, and it's financially smart. Because if we don't provide these services, the challenges and the other costs that come to bear are astronomical. So it's the financially smart thing to do, and it's the right thing to do.
Thank you. So looking at some of the issues that are really pressing for our populations, one is food insecurity, which I know is a concern for a lot of people, but a particular issue for seniors and people with disabilities. How would you address that?
Well, we need to make sure that programs are in place, and again, that we're investing in the resources to make sure that some of the programs that have been temporary are made permanent. Also, things like the nutrition programs such as SNAP, for one example, and WIC. They've provide temporary provisions, during the pandemic that have allowed people with disabilities to qualify, but those should be made permanent. And I saw this. I serve on an education service district board in Central Oregon, and we have a lot of vulnerable students that we serve through our program. And we saw during COVID, especially during distance learning, we saw those who were vulnerable in one way or another, their needs astronomically escalate. And so now that we've learned from that time, from this tough, challenging time, we need to apply it and make sure our programs address it. So the needs of pilot programs that allow those to use their benefits to order groceries online, for example. It provides that accessibility piece. It also allows people to be COVID safe. Other things that, making sure the USDA has hunger data, increasing funding to the USDA to really target food insecurity. These are some of the investments we should be making for both our disabled adults and for children and for seniors as well. So access to the internet and providing those tools is sometimes a barrier. And we see that folks with disabilities sometimes have multiple barriers, even getting access to and recognized for SSI and other programs. So making sure we're addressing those barriers so that we're not preventing people who should have access to get the access and the help they need.
So speaking of access, I think one issue we see a lot is access to healthcare that actually covers the needs of our population. Do you have a plan as a member of Congress to improve the health of vulnerable seniors and people with disabilities?
Absolutely. So first of all, I believe that all Americans should have access to a full range of physical and mental health care. And I will say there's a real stark contrast in my race because I'm running against someone who has stated very clearly that she believes that she does not believe in government-funded healthcare. Well, government-funded healthcare includes Medicare. It includes Medicaid. It includes the veterans, the VA programs. And so making sure we're making those investments is really important. The second thing is better coordination with state programs. On issues such as mental health, behavioral health care, we're seeing a patchwork of support provided. And we really need to make sure that those systems are more integrated and we're providing the resources necessary. So there were some initial programs that were provided, but they quickly outgrew the demand. And especially during COVID, people felt isolated. There were higher rates of depression. There were a lot of things that folks were struggling with. And so we need to make sure we're caring for folks because depression, domestic violence, physical health, access to telehealth. And I'm a rural Democrat, so folks in rural areas especially face these challenges. So all those investments in the larger and broader technology and infrastructure are helpful to that program, but specifically in healthcare itself, and lowering prescription drug prices is just one of those things. We've seen costs escalate astronomically. So making sure that the programs are available and are in place, looking at copays because costs are really increasing. And in my own life, I've had that experience that when you have limited resources and other costs go up, your food budget goes down, or your rent, your ability to keep a roof over your head goes down. Those are the kind of things that by investing and protecting people in the right areas, we allow retirement with dignity. We allow that sense of security in people's homes so they're not food insecure and they're getting the healthcare support they need. Again, healthcare especially, if you get what you need ahead of time, it's a low cost. If you wait till people are in crisis, the costs are astronomical. It's a smart investment.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the importance of federal programs coordinating with state programs and streamlining that. When we talk about healthcare and federal programs, obviously we go to Medicare and Medicaid, which you mentioned. What are you planning to do regarding those programs to make sure that seniors, people with disabilities are able to stay in their home, they have access to healthcare, and continue to have access to mental health and substance abuse services?
An absolute commitment to protect them. And let me say it again, an absolute commitment to protect them. That it seems like a simple statement, but that's not the case across the board. It's not the case in my race, and it's not the case in a lot of races. And so people really need to be listening and hearing the catchwords. When someone says they're against government-funded healthcare, keep in mind, Medicare and Medicaid are government-funded healthcare. And frankly, I think we should be expanding, not shrinking. That's part of the battle that was being waged right now. Also on SSI in general, we're having a push to privatize these programs And once you privatize them, you essentially they become a ticking time bomb, because if they are limited, if they depend on the market going up and down in terms of you being protected by the programs in place. So an absolute commitment to protecting. These are investments that Americans have made over the years as taxpayers, invest in the programs that we have. This is about us being other countries are doing it. This is about us being a decent society, showing respect and care for those who are struggling in so many ways. And so protecting those programs and expanding them and making sure they adapt to current needs, it's the right thing to do, and it's the financially smart thing to do.
That's good to hear. Thank you. Just as a final question, we've kind of talked about food insecurity, we've talked about healthcare. Another distinct issue we see a lot is housing. I know it's an issue for a lot of people right now, and it's especially for acute for the vulnerable populations we work with. What are you planning to do to address the current lack of accessible, affordable housing in Oregon for seniors and people with disabilities?
Well, actually, I'm working on an affordable housing project right now and helping out on a project in Southern Oregon that was a carryover, and my commitment to helping folks in Southern Oregon. It was just down the road from where I finished high school. And there's a need for seniors, for folks with disabilities, for folks who are more vulnerable. But all Oregonians are struggling with this. And actually, it's a nationwide program, but all 36 counties in Oregon, housing is a problem. So it's making more investments in infrastructure. And infrastructure has been signed, and we've got infrastructure programs ongoing. Those are critically important, but we need to make more investments. And there's ways to do this. And I could go into the details, but we don't have time in this conversation on how we allocate more funding to communities and cities to be able to build more affordable housing. We make those investments, and there's ways to do it to keep it below market rate so people can afford them. But the other thing is, the important part of understanding the challenges people are facing is putting in the specific requirements and earmarks so that we would increase the percentage of houses that are accessible, for example. Because if you are physically, you have limited physical mobility, you've got to find a ground level apartment because there's a fear of the elevator going out. This is what I've heard from my disability advisor who advises me in my campaign. And so making sure we're making those investments, making sure there's earmarks in there so that we're addressing the challenges and needs that people have. And it benefits everyone for more increased funding. But it's also other programs as well, as mentioned, home health care, some of these other programs, and making sure those resources are provided. Look, I don't have time to go through all the programs I want to talk about, but people can go to my website, jamiefororegon.com, and please join us and give us feedback, because the way that I become a better advocate is by learning and listening. So I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation, and I appreciate very much the work that you do. I am absolutely committed to protecting these programs and expanding and growing them. And again, in the 5th Congressional District, in my race, there's a stark contrast between my commitment to making sure we're protecting those, building safer and healthier and more secure communities and allowing retirement with dignity, versus undercutting and pulling some of this funding away. And so would appreciate the support of those listening.
Thank you so much, Jamie, for taking the time to answer all our questions today. We really appreciate it. And to everyone watching, thank you for joining us today for this interview with Jamie McLeod-Skinner, the Democratic candidate for Congressional District 5. Have a good one.
Thank you so much.
I want to thank the candidates on behalf of the members of the Senior Advisory Council and the Disability Services Advisory Council of Northwest Senior and Disability Services for attending our candidate interviews. Copies of the interviews can be checked out from Northwest Senior and Disability Services by calling 503-304-3451. Again, that number is 503-304-3451. We hope the information that has been provided will help you make informed choices when you vote. The opinions expressed here are not endorsed by Northwest Senior and Disability Services. For more information or to get connected to services provided by Northwest Senior and Disability Services, please call 1-866-206-4799. Again, that number is 1-866-206-4799. The advisory councils for Northwest Senior and Disability Services would like to thank Capital Community Media for the production of the forum. Thank you for watching.